Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth.
Goeiedag, good day, fellow
All
South
around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. So lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Yes, we're back on lovinglifetv.com. Isn't that great? And Rudy is still working on the transition, but it's very close to complete. And once we're up on the new platform or the new hosting service, it's going to be so much faster. There won't be any buffering at all. That's a promise from Rudy. Okay, now, Loving Life family. A most extraordinary thing happened while I was working on videos this morning. The main Loving Life channel on YouTube suddenly reappeared like the ghost of YouTube past and is fully operational again. This after, for 2 weeks, it had been shut down on the suggestion that it did not fit with community standards. Don't ask me what happened. I don't know. I've never heard of this happening before, but it happened. I have no idea why this happened or how long it will stay up, but it will be used to promote Loving Life TV, as we are in control now, not YouTube. Since going up, a huge number of people have joined lovinglifetv.com, and I want to welcome those new people who've joined LLTV. We have some good news on the child abuse story I just posted on Loving Life TV. Just posted an hour ago. You'll see it under most recent videos on the homepage. Okay, Marlena contacted Mike Bolhace, who is now personally involved in this police matter. Thank you, Marlena. I've also posted another video giving an update on what happened at White River a few days ago. This includes the young couple in the police station, their statement, and an audio interview with Jacques, who owns a security camera company named in the event, as well as an audio from the alleged assailant. All right, without any further ado, let me go and get our guest on. And of course, that is Mike Lacey-Smith. And we're going to be talking about the emotional impact that the lockdown has had on people, but in particular, children. Here we go. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
Excellent, thank you. Excellent.
Good. Can you see me?
I
Here I
can
am.
indeed. I can indeed.
Are you well, brother?
Excellent, thank you. Excellent. Now,
Good.
Mike, a year ago,
Yes.
the world went into various stages of lockdown over what a lot of people, me included, believe is a scamdemic. A
Yeah.
million people or 4 million people in Queensland have to wear masks again right now because about 10 people in a known cluster who are all in isolation tested positive.
Yeah.
Now, this is crazy.
No, I hear you.
Now,
I hear you.
what has been the biggest effect on people emotionally during this pandemic?
Well, I think the biggest one has been fear. We add to that anxiety, stress, depression. So the biggest one I think has been fear. When you just look at the media, every time you switch on the TV, all you've got is doom and gloom. And you know, when I wrote a book about this published during the lockdown called Life After the Pause, and this time it's called The Pause. A lot of what I wrote has actually come to fruition across the world. So if you consider, I didn't write this in the book, but I said right at the very beginning that every 3 months we would be hit with another kind of wave, if you want to call it that. So day one, let's take South Africa, 26th of March. We've got this virus. It's deadly. It's most probably surface-borne, maybe airborne. 3 months later, it's airborne, but you can get immunity. 3 months later, actually, you can't get immunity. Another 3 months later, we've been hit by the second wave. Exactly 3 months later, we've now got a third wave. So every 3 months, we get hit with a huge new perspective on this virus. Which I've done a lot of research and reading, and there was some research that was done by a laboratory in the UK where they tested 1,500 positive samples, and every one of them came up with influenza type A and influenza type B. Look, believe me, this is a virus. And yes, it is deadly. We know that. But so was the Spanish flu. So was bird flu. Then we had swine flu, and all of those. It is a deadly virus. But I want us also to consider that in South Africa, according to the stats as I've read them, so I stand to be corrected, that between 35 to 45,000, 50,000 people die from influenza every single year in our country. It's a natural process. It's just what happened. And I have yet to see any statistics, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, any statistics for reports for influenza deaths in our country over the last year.
I was just about to ask you, what happened to the flu last year?
Apparently it disappeared. Look, we understand it disappeared. But this is a deadly virus. Just like any virus, it is deadly. We've now got the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the South African variant, and now in India they've got a new variant, and in the UK they've got their own variants, just like any common cold flu does. And I'm following a man in the States called Dr. Eric Napute, very interesting man, has a very strong faith, but also incredibly interesting in the way that he presents the facts. And he says we need to look at common sense. And I think the world has kind of lost common sense somewhere along the line. The common sense says, yes, we can catch this thing. Yes, people with comorbidities are more at risk. We understand that. And I'm not knocking the fact that this is deadly. For certain people, it is deadly. We know that. It's a virus. But is it world control? I don't know. Is it flu? Has it flu-like symptoms? Yes, it has exactly the same. It has effects on people who are hugely at risk. I've lost friends to this virus. I've lost friends and some really, really good people to it. So, and people that I know, they've lost family and friends too. So, not taking away from the fact that it is a virus, not taking away from the fact that yes, people have died. Tragically, may their dear souls rest in peace. But it is a virus. We know it's there. But you know, is it influenza? What is it? And if you find anything on the news, anything that contradicts anything simply gets taken down. It just disappears.
Oh, I know that better than most. That happened to my main Loving Life channel because I did put up information. Now this is the incredible hypocrisy of YouTube. Okay,
Yeah.
I put up information about ivermectin and
Yeah.
suggested that this might help against the virus.
Absolutely.
And those videos were immediately taken down. This is late last year. Immediately taken down by YouTube, and I was given a copyright strike. And then all of a sudden, it became fashionable to suggest that ivermectin could be a solution, just like I had suggested early in the piece. And while I was still suffering from strikes for suggesting that, YouTube then allowed people to have videos suggesting that. So I was still being basically punished for saying something that they were now allowing a couple of months later. The hypocrisy of YouTube is extraordinary.
No, I understand that. And, you know, we look at ivermectin, right? Ivermectin was suddenly announced as being banned in our country. And it was fought against because it actually is registered to be used with human beings for certain conditions. Now, after watching Dr. Eric Napute, he made some interesting observations. He spoke about ivermectin. And what ivermectin does is it attaches to the ANE6 receptors. Look, any medical person, please, if I've got the terminology wrong, but the receptors in the lungs. And it's been shown to protect from all the research, and it's been shown to, for people who do have COVID, to actually cure, if we can give it that word. A good friend of mine had two friends who were diagnosed with COVID, were in hospital. Somebody sneaked them in some ivermectin. They were told they told everybody they're going to be on respirators and all sorts of things, and chances are they were going to die. Somebody snuck them in some ivermectin, and they walked out of the hospital 2 days later. So just in the same way that ivermectin works, so does zinc. So does zinc. It works on exactly the same ANE receptors. And if you go and look at Dr. Eric Napute, he's given away millions of bottles of vitamin D6 and zinc to people in the States. He even advocates that people don't need to wear a mask. So it's interesting. The moment anything controversial comes up, and remember that ivermectin is not owned by Big Pharma, and because
it's dead cheap. And I'll tell you something else, that hydroxychloroquine, which Donald Trump took very early in the piece when he was trying to fight back against COVID-19. As soon as he took that, of course, the media went into Frothyville. You know what Frothyville is? Where they go beside themselves. They were trying to shoot down hydroxychloroquine, calling it rubbish and da-da-da-da-da. And that was what is actually happening behind big media or the fake news is Big Pharma, because they're all owned by the same people. So what they're trying to do is push the barrow of vaccines. That's quite clear.
It's very, very clear. You know, pushing it to the point that people won't be able to travel without a passport. But then again, I have a question. There are many people who have autoimmune disorders, and those people with autoimmune disorders, if they do take the vaccine, and we have seen multiple deaths from the vaccines, which have all been hidden. In Israel, as somebody told me, they called the vaccine a possible second Holocaust. So please, that's as they reported it to me. But the issue is that the certain people cannot take it. They can't. The risks are too high for their bodies. And what happens to them? What happens to them? Do they get a letter from their doctor saying, listen, if they take the vaccine, they're going to die? And we really don't know what's in these vaccines. There's so much theory, and of course the rollout of it is now being pushed worldwide. I mean, South Africa had a family meeting the other night. We called that with our president, who's called a family meeting. And all he did was ban alcohol sale over the Easter weekend, but the rest of the time was pushing vaccines. And we really don't know what's in them. We seriously don't. Certain brands are saying, yes, you can take it, fantastic, you can take it, but yes, you'll still get COVID, but no, you won't die. I don't understand it.
Well, I'll tell you something that I find quite extraordinary, and about this is about what 15 years ago. 15 years
Yeah.
ago, I was in Brisbane. I lived in a different suburb called Maruka,
Yeah.
and one of my friends, his name was Peter. He actually worked for Pfizer.
Okay.
And do you know what his job was?
No.
He used to go to or every single doctor in Brisbane, and he took these little test samples of Viagra. That was the product that he was actually, promoting for Pfizer. And he told me that each doctor had a plan. If they sold enough Pfizer tablets, they would get a free holiday paid for by Pfizer. Now, if that's not coercion, I don't know what is. That's how these drug companies work.
Well, they're in it to make the money.
Yeah.
And the people who are getting the richest, or will get the richest out of all of this, will be the big farmers. Whereas ivermectin, really...
there's no money in it for them.
There's no money in it for them at all across the world. It's an independent... it's used for livestock, for pests and all sorts of things. But its efficacy to this point, the stuff that I've read, and you can't even say ivermectin on Facebook because people now are going to IVM, capital letters, because anything that comes up with IVM, when I post stuff on, I've got a group called Life After the Pause, where I post stuff, and if I post the word COVID-19, there's a little flag that comes up. It's one of those things. COVID-19 is real. It's a real word, and if you post ivermectin, posts get removed. So IVM. So people are now talking in code to so that these words don't get picked up on various forums.
Well, I'll tell you, it's actually got worse on Facebook, Mike.
Yeah.
If you now pick up a post that Facebook thought police deemed to be harmful, and you post it on your page or have a link on your page or whatever you do. I don't use Facebook much. You get a strike as well, just for daring to do that. It's just ridiculous.
That happened to me. I posted an article, something on IVM, ivermectin. So I can say the real word, ivermectin, and the next thing it came up with, this has possibly got some fake news in it, and it was actually an academic paper, so it got taken down. It was an academic paper, and I go and search for academic papers. I want to see what the world is saying, particularly after having written and spoken about how this is going to affect people across the globe.
Right.
Look,
now,
let's not take from the fact what it is.
Now, having that bit of intro into what a scam this whole thing is. Let's get back to the biggest effect on people emotionally during this pandemic, and surely that's got to be the lockdown.
Well, the lockdowns have come in different stages. So hard lockdown, obviously, just threw the world into turmoil. I think when I started the book, I said in one elongated moment, the world changed and nothing would ever be the same again. I think that was the first line that I wrote. And hard lockdown had huge effect on people across the globe. We got locked down in South Africa, one of the longest lockdowns in the world. To the point that I do facilitation in companies. I'm a psychologist by trade, but I do facilitation and training, and there's nothing to do. Everybody got locked down. I got locked down for no work for almost 7 to 8 months. That was a long time, 7 months,
So,
full
so
months.
your clients who are obviously needing emotional help and support get
Yeah.
none during that period.
Well, yeah. Well, it's in the training side. I don't run my practice anymore.
Right.
But
But
I did.
if for a
Yeah,
psychologist, that would be the situation, wouldn't it?
absolutely. I think a lot of psychologists went to online, but that's very different from one-on-one.
Mm.
We understand that our basic humanity is found in our connectedness, and
We're
I
social
think,
creatures.
yep, and we got separated. I think lockdown caused massive anxiety. I mean, I've done a lot of research into what has happened to people during lockdown. I want you to consider a few things. First of all, think about somebody locked down by themselves,
Yeah.
not with a support system, not with people around them. That is must have been incredibly lonely. I mean, fortunately, I have a garden that I can walk around in. But think about the people who are stuck in a one-bedroom flat. That's it. That's it. Caused incredible detachedness, if we can give it that word. And just the fact of being together in a social setting with another human being must have been absolutely soul destroying for them. Secondly, we need to also consider people who have psychological disorders or psychiatric disorders.
Yeah.
Absolutely tragic for people stuck in their own heads, and every time you switch on the TV, all you've got is doom and gloom. And I think media, mass media around the world has done its absolute best to instill fear.
Absolutely. We have the same here in Australia.
Yeah, there's the fact is that South Africa then got put into a second lockdown. We went back to stage 2. So I'm a facilitator, and suddenly I can't speak to people. I have to do online workshops with people, which takes away the connection. Hopefully, we're going to get over all of this and get back to being what I call post-virus. In my book, I talk about pre-virus, the pause, and post-virus. The pause is now. It's really strange because I said in the book that this is most probably going to be with us for years. It's most probably going to be with us for years, and people kind of said, it's not going to be with us for years. I mean, we're going to get over this. It's going to be with us for years. It's sad. We're already 1 year in. One year and 1 month in. It's going to take another year and a half for us to get back to anything that resembles anything that is normal.
Well, can I just suggest, Mike, that the World Health Organization is going to let this thing run as long as it wants to, until it's just absolutely trodden populations into the ground, and they will accept just about anything. You've already got the situation where people don't want to take the jab, but they're saying, I just want to be back normal again. So they take the jab, not knowing what they're actually taking. This is genocidal. It's just wrong.
It is, and the stats are being hidden, I believe, for the people who have had massive negative side effects.
Yeah.
Something came up the other day. One of them was causing blood clots, and it was kind of squashed. And I haven't seen anything since then. It's gone. Causing blood clots in people. We haven't been able to create a vaccine for a common cold. We have not been able to create a vaccine for HIV.
Yeah.
Now, a virus by its very nature mutates. It cannot stay the same. And when we were small kids, they gave us all those jabs. Or for smallpox and all those other things. And what they essentially do is inject the shape of the virus. Just its shape. The body will recognize, create its own antibodies against that shape. If that shape illness gets into the body's already got a system, an immune system. But you can't do that for the common cold. You really can't do that for flu because it mutates. It changes. So how is there one size fits all vaccine for something that keeps changing, keeps mutating? It's in my mind it's illogical. That's me. That's my opinion. That's just Mike. But it's illogical. And how do we suddenly get it in a year when we haven't been able to do the common cold or flu prevention. Look, some people have the jab and they may not get ill. I got one of those, and I landed up about 10 years ago. I got the jab, was perfectly fine, but everybody said, get it, so I did. And I got pneumonia. I got sick within about 20 minutes of getting it, and I landed up with pneumonia. So how do we get this vaccine that so miraculously has come out of nowhere?
Yeah.
And companies that haven't even been involved in medical research and all sorts of things suddenly have the know-how to produce a vaccine. Look, a lot of people are going to look at you and me and say we're insane. Can't wait for the vaccine. But I watch the stuff on Facebook. I watch the COVID announcements. I watch what people say. I watch very, very carefully. And many people think the same way that I and you do. How on earth do we get a vaccine for something that changes? It's in this short period of time. In my mind, impossible.
Well, the drug companies have admitted that every 6 months people will have to have another jab because the virus is going to adapt or change, so that the jab you had 6 months ago doesn't work. The whole thing is a load of crap, to be quite frank. Excuse my English. But let's get back to the mental health side of things.
Okay.
Now what we don't hear in the media are the number of suicides that are taking place around the world as a direct result of the lockdown, the fear that they have because of this virus. They feel like their whole world has imploded around them. You know a lot about this stuff. Please tell us what the state of play is.
Okay, well, during lockdown, I became kind of an emergency counselor on a very big group on Facebook, because people would say, I'm going to end it all, and then they'd give it to me, they'd phone me, and we'd get a number, and I'd phone them. And also on a gaming platform, a computer gaming platform, a friend of mine looks after one of the servers, and there were so many young people who were going onto the chat groups, and I became an emergency counselor for them too. But fortunately, I hope and I believe that I saved some lives. But personally, I know of 6-7 people who have committed suicide during those times. Spoke to somebody a short while ago and said they know of 11 attorneys who've committed suicide. Spoke to a pastor the other day, and he said he's had to go to 30 families where people have committed suicide. And there's a lot of there's a lot of research, and I'm just going to click onto my screen because and I'm going to give the reference for it if I may. Can I do that? It's a paper that was put out by Stefanos Mastro Theodoros. He's a doctor from Utrecht University, Utrecht in Netherlands, and he wrote a paper on the effects of COVID on young people's mental health and psychological well-being. So if anybody wants to have a look, I'll just give them the reference to that paper if they want to. I don't know where it is. I just want to have a look at it. Here it is. Here, it's https://pjp -eu.coe.int. So that's the reference to this paper. So I'm not just pulling words out of the air, but it's very interesting if you go through and have a look at the effects on people's psychological well-being. And I'm just scrolling down to the article because I've highlighted a lot in the article. And he talks about the effects of disaster now as a first reference point. And if you look at people who've been through natural disasters, let's say the tsunami in Southeast Asia, the nuclear accident that happened in Japan, and look at the nature of disasters. And the disaster is something that has an effect on people's psychology. COVID-19 has been a disaster. It's been a long-term disaster, and the effects that it's had on families and communities, societies, work, economies has been absolutely completely destructive. And just a line I want to read from here. It says, past research has indicated that compared to adults' mental health, young people's mental health is often disproportionately affected by calamities. Very interesting, talking about younger people. In addition, social isolation and loneliness precipitate depression and anxiety in children and adolescents. And these are all referenced and talked about. So should I talk just briefly about adolescence first and then go on to the rest?
Yes, please do.
Because, being an adolescent, it's a very interesting thing. I've read many papers, and I was a teacher and worked with teenagers, and way back before the Rinderpest, but I loved it. Absolutely loved being a teacher. I suppose I'm an adult teacher now. But teenagers' brains wire differently, completely differently during the time that they're teenagers. And there are very important things that happen during this time, especially for teenagers. There's the advent of new cognitive capacities, new ways of thinking. As they start to sort of grow into young adulthood, there are huge neurological, biological changes and changes in social interactions. Think about it. A teenager would rather be recognized by their peers than by their parents. It's just kind of one of those strange parts of the wiring of a teenager. And there's increasing independence from their parents. Okay, these are important factors. And as they grow through these processes, it gradually helps them to navigate, as he says, possible adult roles. But he also says that all of these things have been severely threatened by the pandemic, hugely. And remember, teenage years are if you go back to developmental psychology, we go through certain developmental phases where, let's say, a child of 2 going 3 goes through a phase called autonomy versus shame and doubt. And that child, you say to put on your shoes, no. Eat your broccoli, no. And that is part of that autonomy where they can actually stand up for themselves. Look, parents, it's a difficult time. If they negotiate that relatively well, when they become a teenager, they don't have to renegotiate. If they have not negotiated, if it was shut up, sit down, eat your vegetables, do what I tell you, blah, 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 the child lands up becoming a teenager and becoming a complete rebel during that time. And adolescence is a time of often the beginning of many psychological symptoms coming to the fore, like schizophrenia, like bipolar disorder, often depression, huge anxiety. It's during this time that it actually comes to the fore. Now, and many other psychological things that happen. So we call this psychological vulnerabilities during the time of being a teenager. And there's a new word that came out in this research that I've been reading about, which is called emerging adulthood, which is from the ages 18 to 25. And during these times, people have to complete their education, find a job, become financially independent, all those sort of things. But being a teenager is a tough thing, because he says in this article there are 3 main ways by which the COVID-19 pandemic can affect mental health. Okay, first, this pandemic is long-term. So if we take it as a long-term disaster, compared to some of the other disaster research, what you've got is, it's not just a little incident. It's not simplify a tsunami, but it's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing daily event that disrupts daily routines. And I want to think about kids going to school. If you think about, most of it was homeschooled. I think parents learn to drink a whole lot more and respect teachers a whole lot more too. But it disrupts their daily routines. And I learned something when I was teaching. All teenagers want is 2 things: rules, and they want them to be fair. That's it. Okay, I found that, and I haven't got time to talk about it. But they want structure. They want some form of structure against which they can compare their thoughts and beliefs and values and all of those sort of things. But they just need them to be fair. And the sense of fairness across the whole world in terms of what has happened with this pandemic is people seeing it as being so desperately unfair, with nobody to blame for this thing, nobody to nail for it. So what's happened is that there's this long-term pandemic has become a huge source of stress for adults and youth. Secondly, it's what they call it a multi-systemic disaster. In other words, it doesn't just affect one system; it's affected the whole system, the microsystem, meso, and the macro system. So social interactions for teenagers completely disrupted. I mean, think back to when we were teenagers. All we wanted to do was be with our mates. It disrupted that completely.
Can I just speak
Yeah,
on that, Mike? I think you've hit a really important point, and that is when even before the lockdown, when I went to a coffee shop, you'd have a young guy and a young girl sitting opposite each other with their coffees, and they'd both be on their mobile phones texting to someone.
yeah,
And here they are supposed to be socially interacting. What their social interaction is through the mobile phone. Now,
yeah.
isn't this what's happening now with the lockdown going to exacerbate that behavior? Because what I've noticed in Brisbane is when I don't often go out, but when I go out to the shops, people live in that you can see the fear in their eyes. It's like this, don't come close to me. It's like this sort of, they've changed. People have been indoctrinated with fear.
Well, I agree with you. I was doing a workshop online and speaking to some senior executives, and I said every time we put on a mask, it causes fear. So think about it. We get up, I haven't forgotten my wallet. I forgot my mask, and people are wearing these masks. And I think, but somebody actually came with an interesting point, and I'll come to it just now. But when people wear masks, it's fear. It's a fear factor. We get reminded every single day when we put these things either behind our ears or around the back of our heads that we're living in fear. Person had an interesting point. One person said, no, actually, I see it differently. I see it as being hope and protection. And I took her point because it's a very powerful point. Yes, there's protection and from this virus, but I think every time, my opinion, and I respect hers, which is very powerful, my opinion is every time we put a mask on, it reflects fear. So we put this thing over the back of our face, cover our face, and we are now completely fearful, apart from the fact that we are putting massive amounts of carbon dioxide into our system, which is dangerous for our systems anyway. And yes, to go back to the world of cell phones, I think you look at people and they go and they sit. My wife and I, if we go out or have been out, we will sit and talk to each other. At a certain point, a phone might go bing bong. It might be a message, and I'll say, "Excuse me, can I take this message?" And we kind of look for 3 minutes, put the phones down. But you can see so many people just sitting in places, sitting with phones. And I think that's been the major connection between people across the world. I think that's one good thing that's come out of it, is that people have started to recognize that other people are in the same place as them. But I think we're becoming more and more slaves to our cell phones. And the problem is we keep on getting negative news through exactly the same platform, which is supposed to bring us connection. So it's a double whammy. People are connecting, yes, at least they're speaking to people. Imagine if this had happened and we'd all just had Nokia 3110, or imagine then. But we can talk to each other, we can connect, we can video connect, we can do all those things. But that does not replace face-to-face. Me sitting in the same room as you, talking to you, another human being, me walking up to you and giving you a hug and saying, how are you?
Yeah.
Everything is virtual hug. People love this Wi-Fi thing.
Yeah, touch your elbows. Now,
yes, exactly.
I take public transport here in Brisbane.
Yeah.
And when I get on a bus or a train, I would say that everybody else in the train or the bus has got these little earpieces plugged into their ears. They've got their little phone in front of them, and they're in a different world. There's no interaction. You can actually be sitting opposite someone and say, hi, how are you going? And they're so engrossed in their phone, they don't even hear you. I mean, what the heck is going on?
I think people have become distanced from each other and that distancing from each other has made them distance themselves from the world. You know, I still love South Africa, where you can actually walk into a place and say, "How are you, my brother? How are you doing?" And they say, "I'm fine. How are you?"
Yeah.
We can do that. We can do that. We can communicate. We can speak to each other. But I think people have become. There's a man called Julian Treasure. If you go look for him on TED Talks, he wrote a book about listening. Now, if you and I had written a book about listening, I think I would have got to about 2 pages and stopped. And he says that when people take these earphones, go look for him on TED Talks. Okay, 6 ways to listen better. He says when they put headphones in their ears, the whole world just becomes little micro bubbles. They lose everything around them.
Yeah.
They lose the sense of connection, and connectedness has been lost. I think there has been a different measure of connectedness in the fact that people have actually got behind causes. I mean, we got. You know, I'm a biker as well in South Africa. I'm very involved in the biking world, and I love the people in the biking world. They're most magnificent people. And we had bikers against farm murders, and I think we had 40,000 bikers in Pretoria, 40,000 in one place. If I saw 10% wearing masks, that was a lot. And as far as I know, not one case of COVID was reported from that. 40,000 bikers in one place.
Wow.
And it's affected the very fabric of our society. It's affected our connectedness. Now, bikers are very social people. We connect.
Yeah.
We have day jobs. We have the things that we do, and we are behind many causes. And we I just love the people, because they're actually genuine, magnificent people. I say that with great respect. We haven't been able to connect with people. We haven't been able to have day jobs. Everything's been shut down. You know, people weren't allowed to go on beaches, for Pete's sake. A beach was, as far as I know, a beach is much safer than sitting in a shopping mall. And people stood up against that too. And I think people have become sheeple, and I think it's caused a great deal of fear, massive fear amongst people, and disconnected at a very human level. One of the things that I wrote in my book is the one thing is if we've learned anything from this time, we should actually be connecting with human beings, just being able to shake hands, give someone a hug. Now, bikers, we have a different kind of world. We don't shake hands. We give a biker greeting. Biker greeting is a hand and over the shoulder, and how are you, my brother, or how are you, my sister? That's just the way it is. It's that very connectedness that makes us part of a community.
Right.
It's fantastic. It's wonderful. And I just the problem really right now is we don't know when the powers that be are going to throw us into another lockdown. Into another lockdown level. We had 5
So the
levels
uncertainty is what you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely, and the level of uncertainty, and the level of uncertainty at one level, yes, we're completely uncertain. What's the future going to look like? Well, we don't know, because other people are making the rules, and so uncertainty psychologically causes anxiety. That's a natural flow out of uncertainty. Think about it. If you're uncertain about something, you're going to stress and worry. That's a natural thing. So the stress is actually the body's response to real or imagined threat. Okay, it is a physiological response to something that's either in your head or something that is in front of you. Now, stress is deadly. You know, it releases a chemical called adrenocorticotropic hormone, which then releases 450 reactions in your body within a millisecond. The whole system changes. The blood flow in your body changes. Your breathing changes. Your heart rate goes up, even if it comes from our unconscious mind. And this is called stress. And the problem is when stress is continually, the stressors, either external or internal, keep on coming up. It keeps on releasing adrenocorticotropic hormone, and it releases more and more and more, and that leads to panic attacks, number one, over a period of time. Okay. Which is a real crisis. If we look at stress, what stress does, the brain has to actually load shed, because the brain's is electrical. It's just a big lump of electrified custard surrounded by water and a leathery sac and a bony crash on it. And when we get stressed, the electrical energy in our brain increases. Now, if that energy gets too much, we have what is commonly called a seizure or a fit. Okay, so what the brain does under stress is it load sheds, just like Eskom. Okay, it switches in your brain. It switches them off automatically to try and keep the electrical energy as low as possible. And one of the first things that it switches off is short-term memory. The second one that it switches off is logic and reasoning. Now, I want you to imagine a whole lot of people in a work environment under massive stress, okay, which is happening right now. You know, and I do workshops. I've got a workshop for people in companies called "Coping with the Effects that COVID has had on you." One for leaders, how to lead more effectively during COVID. When the workshops were first put out, everybody said, everybody's fine. Now people are saying, hang on, something's happening. We've got all these stressed people coming into work. What does stress do? It makes them less productive. What happens when people are stressed? They have accidents. Okay? They make mistakes. And this is one of the first things that happens with stress, is it happens to people at this level. And think about short-term memory. If your short-term memory goes, you find yourself in a kind of void with a great uncertainty. And yes, you've hit the nail on the head. It is the uncertainty, the lack of understanding, the lack of just what is happening to every single one of us around the world. We're just waiting for the next hammer to fall on the next nail.
I just want to give an example of what you're talking about there, Mike, because I had Vicky Momberg on a live stream. You know, the lady who used the K word a few years ago, and went through this complete ridiculous situation with the judicial system. She was clearly on that night. She had just been a victim of a smash and grab. She was already stressed out, and she made the point that she couldn't remember her actions that night. And she also said that she really had no control over what happened because she was in such a stressed state. Now, what you've just said confirms her situation. I'm not going to labor this point, but it's just interesting you raise that.
It's we call that, we actually have three brain structures. The first is a reptile brain. If you look at a baby in utero at 14 weeks, it has exactly the same brain as a lizard.
Right.
Okay, then we have a mammal brain, which it has logic, reason, structure, some measure of connection. A dog, a cat. And then we've got our human brain, which has consciousness. It has conscience. And I think the world has become almost conscienceless during this time in many respects. In some areas. In other areas, I think our social consciousness is raised. But it has language, it has spirituality, it has all these beautiful things. When stress is triggered in our body, we devolve in our neural structure down to our reptile brain.
Wow.
which is fight or flight or freeze.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, it's also the same brain that keeps us alive. We're driving on the road, some idiot jumps a stop street, we hit our brakes immediately. It's that survival brain that keeps us working.
Right.
But what many people don't realize, that when people are under massive stress over a long period of time, they're actually staying in their reptile brain function. It's very hard to function as a human being. We're actually functioning on the edge, if you want to call it that. And fight or flight or freeze. And I think so much of the world is in fight or flight or freeze at the moment. We're just waiting for the next thing. You know, I want to see this as a time when we're going to change and evolve, not devolve. You know,
right.
We need to evolve as human beings. But are we evolving or are we devolving? Are we actually going backwards in many respects? I'd love to think that we can evolve.
Now,
you know,
just talking about the lockdown, clearly when people are isolated, they don't evolve, they devolve in what you're suggesting here.
Absolutely. When faced with enough stressors, okay, and Bernice Newgarten calls this the clustering of events. Got a whole lot of stressors in our life. Let's say you've got family stressors, we've got financial stress, we've got the stress of the pandemic, stress of lockdown, loneliness. She calls that the clustering of events. And all of these go into one big ball, and you can't distinguish one from the other. And I think that's what's happened. A lot of people have devolved, where they've just all their stressors are clumped into one. They can't separate them from each other. And that's what's happened to so many people. And there's absolute danger in especially it releases two chemicals, one called adrenaline, which is our fight or flight kind of,
Right.
One is cortisol. If cortisol is not detumesced healthily back into the body, in other words, if that sense of fear and the sense of stress doesn't go away, what happens is I'm just going to click this one screen off. What happens is people what they do is that they stay in the sense of heightened anxiety. And here's some interesting research that when cortisol is not detumesced, absorbed back into the body healthily and is at a hugely high level for a long period of time, research lately has said that can actually trigger our cancer cells.
Wow.
And in our body. And let's think about how many people have had heart attacks and strokes.
Yeah.
How many people during this time, relatively healthy people as well, simply because of stress. Stress can give you a heart attack with a healthy heart and a stroke with a healthy brain. And think about the effects that this is having on people, especially being isolated, being locked up, not being able to connect with other people, as we always did. You know, people are talking about waiting for the new normal. What is this new normal? I would like to get back to normal.
Yeah.
Forget about new normal. New normal, that phrase means that there's a catch to it. I don't believe our future should have a catch to it.
Well, let me put this question to you, Mike. I mean, socially, civilizations have evolved naturally, okay? And up until about, say, 60 years ago, the family unit was the core to, society. You had your father, you had your mother, and you had the kids. Divorce was unheard of.
Yeah.
Gay and lesbian people were unheard of. Everybody basically was part of a family. Now, since about 1960s, when you had the hippie period, everything started changing. You know, you started having divorces increasing, a huge number of people becoming very depressed, suicide rates going up, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Now, just talking about suicide, have you got any figures on how many people around the world have committed suicide during this scamdemic?
I don't have the exact figures, but I do have some interesting reading.
Yeah, tell us what they are.
Okay, there's a paper. I just want to go to the top of it. Another one that was put out it was the impact of COVID pandemic on suicide rate by Leo Scher, which came from an international journal of medicine. It was published on the 10th of October 2020. And very interestingly, the first line says multiple lines of evidence indicate that the coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19 pandemic has profound psychological and social effects associated with distress, anxiety, fear of contagion, depression, and insomnia, and in the general population and amongst healthcare workers. It's very interesting that it says people who have pre-existing psychiatric conditions, they have been shown to have increased suicide amongst people who are in that sort of trance. But again, if we look at mental health issues across the world, there has been an increase in suicide. So I wanted to take us back to the bird flu in Hong Kong. There was a massive spate of suicides in Hong Kong at that time, and suicidal behavior, according to this paper, is only starting to increase significantly and will peak later than the actual pandemic. That's some of the predictions that have been made. So in terms of outreach, I mean, some of the figures are interesting, and they've come from all over the world in this article. So the Spanish flu, go back to that, was associated with an increase in death by suicide. That's research. And it has been proposed that a decrease in social integration and interaction during the epidemic and fears caused by the epidemic likely increased suicide from this paper. So there's suicide rates I'm just going to skip down through the article. In China, one of the things, 35% of all people who were interviewed in a massive sample had psychological distress. And there was a recent study also that 45% of adults in the USA reported that their mental health has been negatively impacted due to stress and worry on coronavirus. That was a Kaiser Family Foundation study. We talk about family and family structures. I just want to skip down a little bit through here. I found some stuff. Dentists, interesting article. I want to see where it is. A whole bunch of 669 dentists from 30 countries. An overwhelming majority of study participants reported anxiety and fear of contagion. Okay, so here we have this absolute fear again put into them, and we know that dentists have one of the highest rates of suicide in the world. So, yeah, and multiple cases. If you have a look at stuff from psychological literature, I just want to skip down through it because it's very interesting. If you just give me a second as I read, if I read down through it, the social disengagement in Hong Kong during the SARS epidemic had an increase in suicide. So 1/3 of SARS-related suicide victims experienced social isolation during the SARS outbreak. That's very, very interesting. Again, this report also says repeated exposure to reports about COVID crisis can intensify anxieties. I just want to go down and find the other figures because I did highlight them. So uncertainty, as you've said, straight from this article, especially economic uncertainty is associated with stress-related disorders and suicide. That's reference. People can go and have a look at it. You know, millions of people around the world have lost their jobs. What's happened to them in terms of stress and anxiety? So if we look historically at any economic downturn, there is an increase in suicides. Suicides, people who just cannot carry on anymore. So it's increased in many countries. The Great Depression, suicide. So I just want to go and find the other ones that I highlighted. So let's see where I highlighted them. But from America, studies from America have shown increases in suicide. Studies from France, from Germany, from the UK. There have been some contradictory reports from the States, but I think some of those have been squashed. I don't think we've even started to touch the tip of the iceberg of suicides at this moment in time. You know, when people have got nowhere else to go, if they don't have the faith or anything to believe in and the support system, that's when they're the highest risk for suicide. And I think teenage suicides have started to increase across the world. I don't know where I've got the facts. It's in one of the papers that I've got here in front of me. But people can please go and research it. Go and research the papers. You will see. Yeah. And the interesting thing is all of these papers have been done in what we would call progressive first world countries. So where support systems are possibly at their best. What happens in countries where, let's say, like South Africa, I wouldn't call us a first world country anymore, we're a third world country. Our whole medical system, public medical system has just fallen apart. It doesn't exist anymore. It's fallen apart. What happens to those people, to people who actually need access to mental health? You know, I've got another interesting article here that talks about being preventative. That's all well and good in a country like Australia. We know that Australia has an amazing social network. It's absolutely superb in terms of its structure. The UK, very, very strong. America, pretty strong too. Germany, France, all of those. Places like South Africa, places through Africa, that support system is non-existent. And we haven't seen that. All I've got is, from my point, is anecdotal stuff. We haven't had much reports and much research being done in South Africa, but I have understood, and I know of teenagers that have committed suicide. Okay, simply because of the total isolation, the breakdown of social structures. Also, being a teenager is sometimes difficult, and being stuck with a family for a period of time with a set of rules. Hopefully, they would have learned to understand that rules are there and they're meant to be fair.
Now, I just
I
wanted to ask you on that point, Mike.
yeah,
Um, what effect has isolation and self-schooling done to teens and young adults? Because, um,
yeah,
surely this is the time when they emotionally grow up, and you've
yes.
got this long growing period of time where emotionally they've been starved of normal interaction. How is this impacting people who've got teenage kids right now?
I think it's impacted them hugely. I think first of all for parents, especially where parents have not been such good parents, given kids too much freedom, and I don't believe in too much freedom. I believe in you need some structure, and the structure must be fair. Giving them too much freedom in the past, now suddenly they're stuck with teenagers in the house who all they want to do is rebel. And that must have been a living hell for parents who hadn't put structure in for their kids. Okay, kids need interaction. Let's think first of all, less and less kids are playing sport today. When I was at school, you did play sport. You didn't have an option. You would play
Yeah,
a summer sport and you would play a winter sport. When it came to athletics, even if you ran like a slug, you would run. You ran cross country. You did these things. You got out there and you did. Now kids are able to say, I'd actually rather not be involved in sport. I think that's been a huge breakdown in our society, and I think sport is such an important thing. And I was blessed to have a son who is now in IT, uh, hugely talented in the IT world. Yet, even though he had a PC from the time he was a laptop from the time he was 7, and he found his interest in PCs. This is the same boy that used to be outside climbing in trees, falling out of trees, riding on a bicycle, out there doing things that were interesting and fun, playing sports at school, doing all these sort of things, what I would call a balanced life. Now, for kids who enjoy that sort of thing, I mean, think what's happened to sport in schools. Think what's happened to sport at an international level. Think about teenagers who want to meet with their friends, gather with their friends, just be with their friends, be recognized by their friends. It's part of this growing up process where they actually learn to concretize their values and their beliefs and all the things about themselves, hopefully not get into a bad crowd of friends. So just to come to that point, I'm just going to come back to my first point. I think kids who are actually in with the wrong crowd of friends, I think it must have been a blessing for parents to be able to get them out of that, and maybe there was some good that came out of that. But teenagers want to connect. They want to party. They want to be with people. Now they want to
yeah.
be in a classroom. They want the interaction. I mean, I was a teacher. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The interaction, the bantering, the fun,
The
the
parties.
the parties, the healthy teasing, not the bullying. The healthy
Yeah,
teasing. All of that stuff is part of growing up. Now suddenly they're at home, and suddenly they have to interact with a teacher on the other side of the screen. They still have to write exams about things. Um, and the parents, so much more pressure put on parents to make sure that things are happening. I think there's far too much pressure on kids anyway. I was listening to the radio the other day, and there was a child in grade R, before they even started grade 1, with homework, massive amounts of homework in grade R. That doesn't work for me. Let a child be a
yeah,
child. And our education system anyway crushes creativity. It does its very best to crush creativity out of us anyway. Um, but it's had a massive effect on it's almost been a depersonalizing process. And people who overthink, they spend far too much time in their heads. And sadly, for some teenagers, and this has been historical anyway. People think they'll get more attention if they kill themselves than they're getting if they're alive, and that's one of the
yeah,
great tragedies. But it's increased anxiety, depression, and anxiety. What does anxiety do? It decreases people's ability to study and perform. So people are getting lower grades, which causes more anxiety. That cycle. Let's go to universities right now. Universities are, for those who are blessed enough to go to any postgrad study, universities are a place of exploration and fun and free thinking. We're supposed to be free thinking and thinking outside the box, and actually becoming independent and showing resilience. And that's been taken away from them
yeah,
at many, many, many levels. And just another point that stems from that. you've got all these young people in university, let's say, or matriculants, or what we call end of school, grade 12. 2 years ago, the world was their oyster. There were jobs, there were opportunities, all sorts of things out there. And I think suddenly the job opportunities have become less. The anxiety has become higher. The people at university studying already don't have a clue if they even possibly have a job when they finish doing all the studying. All of this created by a disconnectedness and this COVID-19 virus. And I think that's going to have massive effects into the future. It's going to have huge effects. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but social homeschooling has been a disaster for many, many, many kids.
Right.
Okay. Absolutely. Now, yeah. Sorry, Scott.
What has the press done? A, to increase fear in people, and B, when it comes to just covering up the damage to the emotional growth of children. They never talk about that, do they? They just completely cover that up.
Of course. Very little. I've seen very little on the news, or I read articles, but I go search for them. These are not sort of mainstream stuff that people will go and look for. I mean, press does very little to actually talk about, and from what I've seen in terms of news and processes, does very little to talk about support. All it does is talk about the disaster, the COVID virus. And I hope I'm answering the question correctly. There hasn't been much. What has happened too is that the television with kiddies programs has become a babysitter, because parents are working from home too, trying to juggle this job of staying at home, working, trying to manage a family, at the same time keeping the kids happy, watching them with one eye, trying to keep the other eye on a Zoom meeting on screen, working ridiculous hours, because suddenly during lockdown, the traditional sort of 8 to 4, 9 to 5 job became almost irrelevant. People were calling for Zoom meetings at 9 o'clock at night. 9 o'clock at night didn't matter. People actually worked more during working from home, and that's led to huge amounts of burnout in people. Some of the research on burnout is called burnout. Trying to juggle all of these things. Parents trying to be parents, and having to say to the children, please, I'm in a meeting. When you go to work, that's fine. The kids are at school, they're getting educated, they're doing the stuff they should do, but I'm in a meeting. Really tough. It's had massive impact on the family fabric. I was chatting to somebody on Saturday, and somebody said to me they cannot believe how many solid couples that they thought were solid are getting divorced right now.
Wow.
Because of COVID.
Wow.
People who've been married 20 years, 25 years. People who've been married for 3 years. Everybody looked at them and said, this is the most solid couple around. No. I think the stressors have got to them. I think we all want a sense of autonomy, to be able to go into work, and come home to our families. I think all those boundaries have become so blurred, and with kids as well. And just to give a second point is that massive impact that's happened on children is experiencing their parents' stress. I think that's had and for smaller kids, particularly where they don't have the box in their developmental growth to be able to understand financial stress and all those other stresses, that's had a massive impact on younger kids. Massive, because they actually feed off the anxiety of their parents in that moment of time. And poor parents actually tell their kids what their absolute stresses are. Most parents keep it to themselves, but the kids pick up on it, and they are far more intuitive than we could ever believe, and they've picked up on it, and that's affected their emotional development. A child of 6 should be going on play dates, going to parties, doing all those other things that kids do, run around the garden with your friends, throwing imaginary hand grenades or whatever it may be at each other. They should be doing that. They haven't been able to do that. And I think we're going to land up with a whole lot of kids who are going to be developmentally stunted over time.
That is
That's just
shocking.
that's my opinion. So anybody shoot me down if you wish. But I think the development we have to go through. We need to go through these developmental phases to actually progress to the next one. Also to grow into our adult ego state from transactional analysis, to be able to have those adult conversations. And that only happens with girls sort of 13, 14 onwards, boys 18 and sometimes never. But to be able to have that adult interaction, and I think a lot of kids have been thrown, I've just thought about something now, they've been thrown into an adult world that they should never have been thrown into when it comes to stress. I've just thought about that now. I never ever thought of it before. Tell me if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
But these kids who've been shielded from all of the stress have suddenly been exposed to all the stress. And that's massively disruptive. And what it's going to do, it's going to land up with a lot of acting out behavior on behalf of the kids.
You know what I find extraordinary, Mike, is that, look, there's general agreement around the world that this COVID-19 has very, very little impact on children or young people. You know, it's really the elderly, those with comorbidities in their 70s and 80s who are most at risk, which, you know, when you've got a comorbidity, it's likely you're going to die anyway. So the actual locking down of the entire population, I've said this from a year ago. I said what would be a much better way to go is just to isolate the old age homes where the vulnerable people are, keep them almost in a quarantine, and let everybody else go on with their lives as if nothing had happened, because then you would have social interaction. Call it the flu, which is basically COVID-19 is just a bad flu, and just let people get on with their lives. Now, let's forget about the actual economic impact of the lockdown. The emotional impact of the lockdown is going to be as long-term as the economic impact, isn't it? If not longer.
I think if not longer, if not longer. And I think the financial impact is massive. I mean, they've locked down alcohol again, which lost 45 billion rand. I heard on the radio, 35 to 45 billion rand.
It's just ridiculous.
Just lost. I mean, forget about the cigarette, the guys who smoked. I mean, with the lockdown, the cigarettes was just a complete farce anyway. Absolute farce. But yes, I think the emotional effects are going to be even more long term, especially when people don't understand the emotional impact that it's had on them. You know, when I've actually got people together on working on the workshop, which is coping with the effects that COVID's had on you, people look, and sorry if you hear crunching sound, it's just my son's cat eating some of his biscuits. But people have kind of, I don't know. And suddenly one person speaks and the other person says, that's right. That's what I thought. That's what I felt. That's what I thought. And suddenly people find a commonality in the expression and start to, if you don't understand something, you can't work with it. And it's that simple. Dr. Phil, whether you like him or hate him, says you have to name it before you can claim it. One of the common things that, as a psychologist, you say is people write it down. If you write it down on a piece of paper, let's say you want to have goals. Don't just think about them in your head. Write them down. Create a goal board. Stick it in front of you. Write it down. Bring it into being. But if people don't understand something, they can't work with it. It's that simple. And I think the world's being completely confused. Many people around the world are being absolutely confused about the emotions that they've gone through, and not being able to label them and not being able to contextualize them. I think that's the real problem. We as human beings, if we live in this world, I think we want to contextualize everything. So we want to give it a context, give it a meaning, find some understanding. But the problem is people have not been able to contextualize them. I mean, some people have taken this time to go through and actually work out what they want in life and do those things. That's a much smaller group of people than we'd ever care to believe. And without understanding, people can't move forward. I mean, let's go to what the theorists say. We have 8 core emotions, okay, which is love, enjoyment, and surprise. Then we have fear, shame, anger, disgust, and sadness. This is what the theorists say. These are the 8 core emotions that lie in the prefrontal part of our brain.
Right.
And which one of these emotions have been triggered during lockdown? Love, enjoyment, and surprise?
Mm-mm.
I'm not sure. Fear?
No.
Absolutely. Yes. Shame? Could be.
Yeah.
Disgust? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Anger?
Yeah.
Massively. And sadness. So if we go to our core neurology, look, anger, we have to contextualize anger. Anger is a healthy emotion. It just depends on how we express it. Anger is a normal part of life. The problem is people tend to react rather than respond. When people understand something, they can respond, which is a human brain. We go back to the 3-brain profile, which is a human brain response. If they react, it's usually a reptile brain response, which is a fight or flight or freeze, which is unhealthy. So if we look at these 8 core emotions, which have to be contextualized, by the way, and we have to have a go look. We can't just say, I'm angry. That's fine. We have to say, I'm angry because I feel. I'm angry because I feel hurt. I'm angry because I feel let down. I'm angry because I feel dehumanized. I'm angry because I feel lonely. I'm angry because I feel unrecognized. That's fine. Stay there. Or I think this is unfair. Or and if we go one step further and we say, I'm all of these things, and the impact for me if I stay here, again, this is the model of Kharkov. If I stay here, what will the effects for me be? So if I stay angry because I'm hurt, and all I'm going to do is get worse, and then we can then choose another way of dealing with it. And I think what's happened is so many people have been stuck in these 8 core emotions: anger, fear, sadness, disgust. My brain's going too fast. And fear. If people are stuck in there, think how much of the world or the media, what it is doing to create and to trigger these 5 potentially hugely negative emotions in our psychology. I watch the news, and half the time I'm going, for Pete's sake, it's ridiculous, and the rest of the time I'm going, and we just keep on getting these things. I'm just wondering what they're going to hit us with in 3 months' time. What is it going to be? Is it going to be a 3rd wave, a 4th wave? I don't know. This is what's going to happen.
You know what I find absolutely disgusting?
Yeah.
Is Bill Gates. You know, he has a big smile on his face, and he said, "Oh, if you thought that first wave was bad, wait till you see the second one." And you know, then he also basically said in another interview, "Well, you know, we get this needle with a whole lot of stuff in it, and we just put it straight in the vein of a baby to see what it's going to do." And he said that as if he was, you know, talking with great pleasure about what he's doing. Yeah, this guy is psychotic.
I thought he was involved in computers, not in.
He has got no medical knowledge at all, and yet he comes on there and acts as if he knows everything.
I think that's the real danger, is that people actually don't know who's behind everything.
Yeah.
And look, he created Windows. It's stuff we use all the time, but I really don't know what he knows about vaccines. I really don't. And there have been so many of these people around the world as well. Fauci. People around the world. And if you start to see the connectedness between all of them, it's actually terrifying.
Well, Fauci and Gates were roommates at university. Isn't that interesting?
And as I understand it, who funded the creation of this virus? Where did the funding come from?
Yeah.
As I understand, I may have one version, and other people can shoot me down.
It came from the CDC. The CDC put over $3 million into the Wuhan laboratory.
And who was behind that?
Fauci. Yeah.
Yep. So you and I are both on the same page. So the creation of something, and it's supposed to be the mouthpiece for the protection against it, I find that abominable.
Yeah.
In according to my beliefs and values, I find it absolutely abominable that somebody who possibly was who, according to research and what people have said, was there to create it, help to create it, is now there helping to protect us against the very same thing.
Michelle Mullet in the side chat has raised a really interesting point. And I want to quote this
Yeah.
because I think this really makes a lot of sense. She
Mm-hmm.
says, this is Michelle Mullet says, yep, we're talking about Bill Gates, and he created computer viruses and then sold antivirus software. Now, Microsoft always had an issue with viruses. So, viruses could get into, and you couldn't do that with the Apple Mac. It was only Windows platform. Never fixed. And of course, all these antivirus programs came out to plug the holes. This is what you're looking at here with what's happening today.
What amazing insight! I think that's spot on. If you think about Windows, how many times have we been experimented with Windows? Mm-hmm. There was one version of Windows that came out for a short while, which was an experiment to lead to the next one. We understand development and growth and all those other things, but wow, what an amazing piece of insight. The truth about everything that's been behind this process is world control, and it is control. That's
the
my
World Economic Forum.
Of course, it's my opinion, and Agenda 2030 as well, which you have to keep that in mind. My question I have to ask, and it's so they're going to jab everybody with this thing. Right? How do we know? Not me either. And how do we know that what they're putting into us is not a preparation for Agenda 2030? In other words, release another virus bomb into the world that our bodies cannot fight against at all. It's actually been put into us with these vaccines.
Well, let me tell you what epidemiologists are saying exactly about that, Mike, because this is such a scary subject that people need to know. What this vaccine, it's not a vaccine, it's actually impacts or affects your genes. It is not a vaccine. You need to know that. It's gene altering. Now, it basically creates a messenger RNA, which is put into your body, and it impacts every single cell. Now, what they don't know is how that's going to be impacted later. But what epidemiologists are saying is that you've now actually got a particular protein that's going to be developed naturally in the body, which is going to supposedly prevent COVID-19. But because COVID-19 mutates the whole time, when your body faces another variant of COVID-19, because your immune system has been damaged by the vaccine, it can't cope. And people who've taken the vaccine, unlike people who have not taken the vaccine, when they get this new variant of COVID-19, they're going to die because their bodies will not be able to respond. Those who have not taken the vaccine will live because their natural immune system will kick in because it has not been compromised by messenger RNA. This is what a lot of epidemiologists are saying.
I've been reading the same, and look, I have a strong faith, and I have God. When did human beings decide to play God?
Exactly.
I'm going to ask that question
and especially Bill Gates. He actually developed the messenger RNA through Moderna.
Stick to Windows. Stick to Windows. I think he's just a small cog in a big machine. That's my opinion.
Well, you know that his father and he both believe in eugenics, bringing the population down to about 500 million people from 8 billion today.
Yeah.
What a wonderful tool the vaccine is.
No, that is the incredible worry, and it's a fear. I'm not letting anybody near me with a needle. That's just
Yeah.
the way it is. People can shoot me down. They can say what they like, but I am not. I am not. It's also, if you look at some of the interesting stuff that's been written about the mark of the beast, all those other things go into scripture, go into various faiths. I think there's look, people have thought they've been living in the end times since AD 40. But if we have a look at the stuff that's blatant, some of the stuff is absolutely blatant right now. And they just want us in blinkers. And, I'm not going to be in blinkers.
Yeah.
I have these conversations with people, some of the conversations we've had for a while, and people look at me and go, oh, really? The fact that the World Bank, so somebody can verify this, the World Bank sent out funds across the world in 2018 for COVID-19. Have a look at some of that stuff. You must go and have a look and see.
Well, I'll tell you something else that the World Bank did, which is really, really disturbing.
Yeah.
A week before the World Health Organization declared it a pandemic, this is back in February last year, the World Bank released an article saying that COVID-19 is a pandemic. A week before the World Health Organization said it. Guess who's running the show? I think that article was let out too early. I think it was supposed to come out on the same day. But it actually was published a week before the World Health Organization said it. And as you said, the World Bank have got their fingerprints all over this thing and what's happening in countries.
Absolutely. I think
the guy in Mauritius, the president of Mauritius, said that he had been offered $300 million if he would put his people in lockdown. And he said, up yours, I'm not going to do it. He actually openly said, and the fellow in Tanganyika who was murdered, or Tanzania who was murdered, he said a similar thing. He said that he had been approached with this huge bribe as long as he did exactly what they wanted him to do.
I agree, and I think there's obviously there's a massive agenda behind everything. There is an agenda, and the richest and most powerful people in the world are behind it. Who stands to make money? Not your person who's living in the Transkei, not your person who's living in the Outback. The rich are gonna, and what I said in my book is that the rich have become obscenely rich.
Yeah.
The middle class have been battered, and the poor have been devastated.
Yeah.
And
the emotional impact on the entire population around the world has been devastating, and they don't care.
Massive. If you understand this concept of grief, if I can just come to this point, people don't realize that the whole world is in grief. And the grief cycle is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. That's the Dabda cycle of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And people don't realize that we are in grief. We have lost everything that we held to be true, and a life that we had that has been surreptitiously destroyed by an agenda, destroyed from outside of ourselves. So we can go through all the bargaining. What if? There are no answers to what if. It's massive, and we keep on getting hit with more and more information that's coming out, and anything that comes up that is vaguely true or has merit suddenly disappears. I go back to Dr. Eric Naputa. He puts out stuff and it gets taken down. Just I think you've been through the same thing.
Yeah.
He puts it up, take it down. Put it up, taken down. And fake news. Who determines what is fake?
Yeah.
Who determines what is fake? The people who want to cover up that which is true. And I think social media has become a very dangerous place as well.
Well, it's become a very censored place.
It has, and anybody puts out any comment, it suddenly gets deleted.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Now,
yeah, no, exactly. It just gets deleted and taken down. So, Big Brother's watching you.
yeah,
That's kind of Soylent Green and World, all of those things. It's exactly the same. It's world control.
yeah,
When we feel out of control, okay, we become anxious. It leads to psychological disorders, psychiatric disorders, stress, anxiety. It's led to suicide. It has led to the crumbling of companies. It's led to the crumbling of families, the crumbling of communities. I think the world is starting to fight back now. I think I loved it when they weren't allowed on the beaches, and all the bikers actually went on the beaches and said, "Come get us."
we got a couple of bikers watching tonight. I know
I,
that.
that's cool. How are you, brothers and sisters? And greetings from the sons of Joburg. But the I admire that. I was too
Yeah.
far away. I live in
I've got a
Joburg.
lot of time for the bikers.
Oh, they're great people. They're great people. What I love is the fact that bikers get together.
They work together.
We work together. We get the most loving, caring community that you can ever imagine.
And they're very, very misreported by the media, aren't they?
Of course we are. We're kind of marginalized. Everybody looks at us and thinks sons of anarchy. They don't realize that bikers actually raise more money for charities, for people than our government do and the Nelson Mandela Foundation combined.
Now talking about that, there's a child, a 9-month-old child who's got a blindness issue. Do you want to tell us through that? I've got a link to the GoFundMe below this video in the description.
Oh, wonderful. There's a daughter. Thank you. There's a daughter of a baby born to a couple, and she was born with a thing called, if you put the thing up, called PHPV, and that stands for persistent hyperplastic primary vitreosis. So vitreous, which means there's a degeneration of the eye. And this little girl, she was born on the 26th of August to a biking couple, and she was a bit of a lot lamiki. To anybody around the world, she was a little bit of. She's born a lot later than normally expected to be born. But this little girl has gone through, and if you put the link down there, which is www.backabuddy.co.za /champion/project/baby and a shell. Please go and have a look at this. They're trying to raise money to get this little girl, which in all likelihood, without the proper treatment, she will be blind. She will be blind, and the biking world has already started to get behind this. And I'm looking at the cause, and they need about 500,000 and 500,000 to get this little child to the States, where she's going to get the proper treatment, because she's just not getting it here in our government system.
Yeah.
If I go back to the little lad 4 years ago, I've actually got a little, I don't know where I put it, but he was born without reinforcement in his trachea and his esophagus. Amazing little lad. The bikers started the cause, and by the time it had gone through, I think Wackett Simpson got hold of it. I think they needed 5 million to get this lad over there, and they raised 7.8 million rand.
Wow.
Amazing to get this little boy. His name was Calum, little baby Calum, and bikers started it, and the rest of the world got involved and got this little boy to the stage. You must see what he looks like now, this happy little child.
Yeah.
We look at this and we say, well, why do we want to do this? Because it's a soul. I have a philosophy. I look at every human being as a beautiful soul, and I will treat them as a beautiful soul until they prove not to be a beautiful soul. But I will treat them as a beautiful soul. And that's if people, please, if you can get behind it. I'm part of the Rainbow Foundation for Bikers, which is an NPO. Last year we had a fundraiser as well through you as well, so thank you so much. It was a really special time, in times when we couldn't gather together. Yeah. So please, if you can get behind this, please go and have a look. You have put the link at the bottom.
Yeah.
Back a buddy and look for baby Anna Shell.
Yeah, it's so tall they can just click on that.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Scott. I actually heard of it through the biking world. I heard of it through the biking world.
Yeah.
And that's why we, anybody who is marginalized, and I think bikers are often misrepresented and marginalized simply because of the way that we look. I tried can I share something? I tried a fun experiment a while ago through Cresta Shopping Centre, and I was in all my biking gear. I'd been on my bike and had to go there to get something. And I decided to do a social experiment. And I walked from one end to the other with my head down, looking at people over the top of my glasses, holding my helmet out to one side, and people opened like the Red Sea. Honestly, they looked at me and thought, I turned around, brought my helmet close to my body, lifted my face up, and smiled at people. And guess what they did? They smiled back.
Yeah.
And I think it was such an interesting experiment. It was my own little social experiment. And I think so many people get judged. To go back to how people get judged for suicide. People get judged for just about everything. People get judged for telling the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the major, we cannot sit idly by as people. And that was one of the reasons for me writing the book that I wrote, is because I felt that what I'd been given through a lifetime of learning, I could actually put into a book to give back to people.
Have you got the book there?
I don't have it, but it is Life After the Pause. It's only electronic at the moment.
Okay.
It's called Life After the Pause.
And where can people get it?
They can get it on Amazon and Kindle. It is there. Amazon
It's
and Kindle.
by Mike Lacey-Smith.
By Mike Lacey-Smith, Lacey-Smith. I also have a group on Facebook called Life After the Pause, where I add some stuff. I have another group called Free to Live, which was meant to promote my company, but actually landed up becoming a motivational site, which is wonderful. It takes very little to share some kindness and some joy with another human being. And I think we've kind of lost that. And I think what's being spewed out at us right now is fear. Unadulterated fear.
Absolutely.
I'll give you a pure example. Just after hard lockdown ended, somebody who'd self-isolated and came to visit us. We were allowed to see people. It was wonderful, and actually shake their hands. And my wife and I both gave her a kiss, hello, and how are you? You're well. And she collapsed here and was taken to hospital, and not through anything we did, and was diagnosed with COVID. And if she was diagnosed with COVID, my wife and I both kissed her hello and hang on. If this thing is the way it is, we should have both got COVID. I'm starting to question, and I question hugely again the statistics. People dying in hospital from heart attacks, and it's COVID. People dying in car accidents, and it's COVID.
Yeah. Well, there's a good reason for that. You know that there's a financial benefit.
Of course there is. So, somebody is there in renal failure, and suddenly it's COVID, and the hospital get paid out for it. I think the world has become consciousless, if I've got the right word, and we're stopping becoming conscious. Except on the other side, a whole lot of people are becoming massively conscious of what is happening around us. Irrespective of what is happening around us, whether people want to see it as the great, hoax-demic or a pandemic, it doesn't matter which way it is still having massive emotional effects on people around the world. It doesn't matter which way you look at it, so you can see it from either side.
Yeah.
Influenza A or this deadly virus that's going to all smite us to the ground. And again, I say to anybody who's lost family members and friends, my heart weeps for you. People dying is part of life. I always say we should enjoy the hellos and manage the goodbyes. That's part of life. It's hellos and goodbyes. I think one of the great crises is that we have not had opportunity to continue managing our hellos to the people around us, causing stress, causing anxiety, causing eventually depression, which is a medical disorder, by the way. It's not a psychological disorder, it is medical. But the stuff that's being thrown at us, we need to start questioning. And I think, like you, Scott, I question everything. I seek to understand it. I don't accept it for what it is. I look forward to when we get to what we're in now, March, April, May, June. In June, we're going to get hit with another massive something. Watch. It's going to happen. It's been predictable.
And there won't be any flu. And there won't be a flu.
No,
Now,
nobody will die.
I'm going to start wrapping up our live stream, Mike, because we've been going for over 90 minutes now. But there's one question I'd like to ask you before we wind up the live stream. How can people learn to better understand and manage their emotions during this time?
Okay. I think one of the things that people need to do is actually spend some time in proper contemplation. People run away from their emotions. That's our human condition. Have you noticed that? Just turn a blind eye to it, first of all. Actually spend some time, sit down, work through it. You know, what I found, and I'm not promoting my workshops, what I found in the workshops, people get a workbook. And when they write it down, they can actually work it and understand it. So, if somebody's feeling anxious, why am I feeling anxious? Don't just label it as anxiety. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way because of this? How is this impacting my life? What can I do about it? Now, many articles have said seek help. Seek help. When people feel that their lives are out of control, go and seek some help. Get some support. Look for it. And traditionally, we've often found that in our family and friends, to people around us. But it becomes one person detached when you're not actually sitting with somebody who can actually help. I think the second thing that people need to do is start to understand that the sense of betrayal that they're feeling is real. And who have we been betrayed by? You know, who have we been betrayed by completely? How do we deal with our emotions? Well, we actually look at the givens. And when we start to list the givens, this virus is with us. It'll be here for a long time. It's going to impact our economy. It's going to impact the way that we work. It's going to impact our families. It is going to change the way we do things. Okay. How do we deal with these things differently? And that means actually standing up and making a plan. And looking at it. You know, I couldn't sit around idly and not do anything. The book that I wrote was actually kind of a labor of love, if that makes any sense. It was kind of, let's contextualize this thing. And believe me, I went through all of those emotions while I wrote it. It was a tough call. It was something, but it was actually putting something down on paper, that when we put something down on paper, we can concretize it. So I think people need to start setting goals. The world has actually said stop setting goals. Do you realize that? Because it's hopeless. It's hopeless. Set some goals. We don't want to be in 3 months' time.
There's no certainty.
No. Set some goals. This is where I need to be. Somebody said, if you don't know where you want to be in 5 years' time, you are already there. One of the most profound things I've ever heard. If you don't know where you want to be, set some goals. Go after them. And I think dealing with our emotions is actually sharing it with people. Sharing it with people who actually want to listen. Go read as much as you can. Go watch motivational stuff. Okay, I think there's some brilliant stuff out there. Deal with it. If you name it, you claim it. Face up to it. Look it straight in the eye and face it and deal with it. If you don't know where to go from there, go find someone who's going to help you to do that. You know, we need to evolve. We need to energize ourselves. We need to educate ourselves with the things around us and not just become sheeple. Another thing that I found, which has been amazing around the world, is been entrepreneurship. And I think so many people have felt helpless. They've lost jobs. But you know what? The people who've got get up and gone out there and started their own thing. And I think that's the way the world is going to go. Is that suddenly you're going to have small enterprises rising up everywhere with brand new, brilliant ideas. Go and look at people are needing a second and third streams of income to support what they're doing, and that's the thing. Go and look for the opportunities. Okay, everybody's looking for the negative. Look for the opportunity. That's one of the things. So the future is what we're going to make it. The future is if we dare to stand up and look at the way that we're feeling and manage it. Because if we don't manage our emotions, they are going to manage us. And the world is doing its best right now to manage your and my emotions through everything that they're spewing at us.
Right.
Stand up against it. Have some independent thinking. Look at it. Look at it in the stark, the reality of it. And stop absorbing the stuff that's coming in at you. Go and stop absorbing it. So, from a spiritual perspective, if you say something out loud, you claim it. Like, this is going to kill me. This is killing me. That's actually a statement which, in many faiths, is actually a curse on yourself. Why don't we stop doing that? Why don't we start speaking blessings over us? Why don't we start speaking possibilities? Why don't we start looking for opportunities?
Right.
What we need to do is actually stand up and be brave enough to stand up, because I think people's spirits are being squashed. No, let me say that again. People are allowing their spirits to be squashed.
Right. Now, those three positive emotions you talked about is where you should be focusing on.
Absolutely. Love, which makes the world go round. Enjoyment and surprise. Those three powerful emotions, which are so much part of the joy of being a human being.
Right.
We need to go out and start to explore those. We need to start exploring joy and passion. I love what I do. Seriously, I love sharing what I've learned with people. Seriously, I do. I just can't say how much I love it. I'm passionate about it, and I love doing it. How many people can honestly say that they're passionate about what they do? I know you're passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
But I'm passionate about it. The opportunities to go and share, the opportunity to go and share with people and say, are you feeling this? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. How to lead with emotional intelligence during COVID. A whole new ball game. We need good leaders. And how across the world have we seen an absolute lack of proper, congruent leadership?
Yeah.
Across the world right now. Look at world leaders.
It's a crazy world.
I hang my head in shame.
I mean, you've got people like Trudeau running a country, you've got a problem.
I think we have some very strange people running countries.
Yeah,
very strange people who possibly have been engineered into those positions over a long period of time. Very interesting. But we need to start thinking independently. We need to stand up. We need to actually start believing in ourselves. We need to start understanding that I allow what comes into my head. I allow the words I speak out of my mouth. If I'm going to allow fear into me, it's going to control me.
Yeah.
If I just look for the joy, that can manifest in joy and connectedness. So I could speak for another 3 hours, but I think people may be getting pretty
We'll
tired.
have to wrap up. Michaela says, wise words, Mike. Now, Mike, I'm going to wrap up now. Is there a message you'd like to give to people who've been watching the live stream tonight?
Well, first of all, thank you, Scott, for the opportunity to speak with you again.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. It's an absolute blessing. The world really doesn't care if you and I are suffering and hurting. Okay? The world doesn't care if we don't have a job. The world generally doesn't care if we're alone. Okay? Except for that handful of people who really, really, really love you. So invest your energy in the people that you love and that you trust, because that's where your support system is. And forget about what the rest of the world thinks of you. I actually don't care what the rest of the world thinks about me. I know how I feel about me in my own heart. So invest your energy in the right spaces. Secondly, don't talk down to yourself. Don't knock yourself. Don't beat yourself up, because the world just celebrates when you do that. Okay? Don't. Look in the mirror and say, you know what? I am enough. I am enough. I love those words. And the world we need to say, I am enough and I am worthy. Okay? Not I'm squashed and I'm controlled and I'm angry. I am enough, and start from there. And don't just say them, believe them. That is called self-efficacy. Believe them in your heart of hearts. I am enough. I will make it through. I'm going to spend my energy with the people who really matter to me, and forget about the rest. It doesn't mean you stop caring for people, but invest your true energy in the people who love you and that you love. And there we'll find some love, enjoyment, and surprise. And you know what? Just be kind to people every day. You never know what they're going through. So that's my kind of message, if you want to put it that way. So,
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Look, it's always a pleasure speaking to you.
thank you so much.
And, it's been great having you on tonight.
Thank you. A blessing for me.
I'm just going to address the side chat now to the moderators. Thanks, guys, for keeping an eye on the situation there. And thank you to the people who've joined us tonight. Please share this video widely. It'll help people, I think, who are wondering what the heck is going on. We've covered a lot of very important points. And I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, when we'll cover another topic. And don't forget, it's 6 o'clock this morning. I'm going to be crossing to Edward and Jarrett, who are on their way to Bloemfontein now. And guess what? They've got that support vehicle, thanks to the Loving Life family. Just so Mike knows, these two guys are on a walk of faith.
Yeah.
And they started in Howick, KwaZulu-Natal. They're
Awesome.
walking. And at Lacey-Smith, one of our Loving Life family, Fiona Timms, put in most of the money for them to get new tackies, because the ones they had were just shocking. And
That's wonderful.
They've now, armed with these new tackies, they're up and firing. We call them the fee tackies now.
Awesome. It's fantastic to have something to believe in and something to work towards. That's
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well done.
And the support vehicle, which they got 2 days ago, was funded totally by another very generous Loving Life family member. That was close to 10,000 rand that was actually donated there to help them through, and that'll take them all the way through to Cape Town.
That's fantastic.
So anyway, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'll be talking to Edward and Jarrett. I know a lot of people here will be asleep, but I certainly won't. Okay, guys, take care. I'll leave the side chat open for a short while. You can see Mike's got his kitty cat there, isn't it gorgeous?
Been sitting patiently, and it's time for dinner just before. This is one of the simple joys in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. All right, I'm going to leave you on the screen while we wrap up with your kitty cat. And, as I say, I'll leave the side chat open for a few minutes. Take care, guys. Bye for now.
Thanks.